What is that thing I know that I wish I could unknow about my life, about my relationships, about myself? What is that inconvenient truth just beneath my awareness? It's just kind of tapping, tapping, tapping. And eventually I'll start punching you, right? But it starts with a little tap. How can I turn towards myself, right? How can I start to look inside? And normally there is a pretty obvious place that has been calling for your attention for some time. And it is typically hidden beneath a veil of fear and or shame. And that is for good reason. All of these aspects, all of these adaptations are there for a reason, and they work until they don't. I say the same thing about alcohol and substances. They work until they don't.
Welcome to Your Health Reset, where we address the real root causes behind health issues today to get you rapid results on your health journey so you can be who you came here to be, mind, body, and spirit. I'm your host, Sinclair, survivor of complex chronic illness, expert on resolving root causes, and co-founder of Detox Rejuvenation and Meditation RX. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Your Health Reset with your host, me, Sinclair, and today's interview is with Dr. Kelly Brogan. I'm going to tell you her credentials, but honestly, this interview was so phenomenal. It was a deep, deep dive into what is really going on in our world today, what our job is as sovereign beings to step into our inner truth, and what that process actually looks like. And we went from granular to like magnificent, and we brought each other to tears. So please cozy up, settle in for a really important conversation. And now here's all of her fun credentials. So she's a holistic psychiatrist. Kelly's also the author of a New York Times bestselling book, A Mind of Your Own, Own Yourself, and the children's book, A Time for Rain, and co-editor of the landmark textbook, Integrative Therapies for Depression. She's the founder of the online healing program, Vital Mind Reset, and the membership community, Vital Life Project. She is phenomenal. And if you want a reminder of what a badass you really are inside and how loving and magnificent you really are, let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Your Health Reset with me, Sinclair Canale. And today I am joined by Dr. Kelly Brogan, who is such a phenomenal force and voice in our time. Thank you so much for coming on, Kelly. It's great to have you.
It's really a pleasure.
So I would love to dive right in and skip past a lot of the fluff of the conversation in mental health today and get right to the core of what we see as the issues that people are actually dealing with as they are getting called into a deeper alignment with themselves. And what are some of the constrictions that are causing some challenges along the way?
I love it. That's that framework as invitational adversity is the game changer, right? It's what shifts us out of the victim consciousness into empowerment with one simple reframe. What is the invitation?
That's so good. Can you unpack what victim consciousness means to you, how you see it unfolding in our culture right now?
So I, like so many, think that it stems from conditioned societal values and habits and patterns, particularly that support parenting, right? So our parents, their parents, their parents' parents only knew conditional love, right? And so we were raised in this kind of binary system of good and bad. And as mammals who spend our fourth trimester out of the womb, we are not only physiologically dependent on our caregivers, but we are actually emotionally dependent on them because of the ways in which that emotional bond ties in definitively to survival resources, right? So if we are not cared for, if we are not considered as important, valued by our mother, let's say, we could literally be left under a tree and we cannot walk and we cannot get up and we cannot feed ourselves. So the existential nature of emotional security and attachment is very real, right? This isn't just a psychological construct that can explain why you might have a certain personality type or be somebody who's prone to depression or whatever. This is relevant to all humans as far as I'm concerned. And what happens is that we are raised to learn how to curate our self-concept, to learn how to present aspects, dimensions, and behaviors to secure love, to secure attention. And what do we do with the rest of who we are, right? The lazy, stupid, petulant, lying, cheating, conniving, right? The ugly, all of those parts that we all have, whether they're hidden in different archetypes or they're just adaptive behaviors that we've, sort of grown to rely on, we hide them. And we hide them ultimately from our own awareness. And this identification that we grow to feel quite fused with is, of course, our persona, it's our personality. And this Jungian construct really paints that as the illusory self. Mm. And you have many opportunities called upset and crisis and illness to explore those hidden dimensions of yourself and invite them back through integration. Unfortunately, we don't have any sociocultural framework to hold that process, to manage expectations around what could, be yielded from such a crisis, or to even help us to understand what the journey might look like. It's archetypal. They're really archetypal elements. And so because we're not aware of that, we reflexively want to maintain a certain status quo, right? So it's like almost like we just keep putting the masking tape on and sticks. And it's like we become this horrific, propped up pantomime of self. And at a certain point, it just all falls apart if you're lucky, actually. And that's where I would normally meet the patients that I've worked with, is at that point, that breaking point, that breakdown, breakthrough point, where whatever they were doing to secure basic needs, right, for belonging and approval and a sense of safety, just stopped working. And no matter what they were doing, the good job, the good husband, the good girl in the family, the pretty face and okay body, whatever they were doing, they still felt that hollowness. They still felt pain. And ultimately, that becomes the invitation. And unless you are made aware that that's actually what's happening, right? So unless you get a diagnosis, whether it's of cancer or Hashimoto's or a psychiatric diagnosis, and you are de-brainwashed enough, by folks like me and others, and you can say, what is this about? What is that thing I know that I wish I could unknow about my life, about my relationships, about myself? What is that inconvenient truth just beneath my awareness? It's just kind of tapping, and eventually I'll start punching you, right? But it starts with a little tap. How can I turn towards myself, right? How can I start to look inside? And normally there is a pretty obvious place that has been calling for your attention for some time. And it is typically hidden beneath a veil of fear and or shame. And that is for good reason. All of these aspects, all of these adaptations are there for a reason, and they work until they don't. I say the same thing about alcohol and substances. They work until they don't. At the moment that they don't is when you can begin to build a relationship of approval, not only to this hidden aspect, but actually to the shame and fear itself, right? Like that was serving its purpose. And beneath it, you'll find, of course, the notorious, famous, however you want to look at it, inner child, right? I call it the child self, where all of your tenderness, all of your play, all of your creativity, this heart connection that you literally cannot survive this human incarnation without, is buried beneath this mess of shadow that itself was, assembled and amassed to keep you from feeling those feelings that you learned in your childhood would kill you if you felt them, right? If you allowed yourself to feel all the fear, if you screamed, if you cried, what were we told? Stop crying, calm yourself down, get to your room or whatever. Like we were told that those feelings are very dangerous to feel. So we found ways not to feel them. Most of the ways, at least, I have plenty of examples of my shadow material, but I'm like a big mental, right? So I go up here and I figure out how it is that I'm right about being wronged. That's how I don't feel the fear of rejection, abandonment, betrayal. I don't have to feel it. And it works most of the time until, of course, it stopped working. Feeling right about being wronged, I always say, is like it's the flag of the victim consciousness. And it hides, this victim consciousness hides in so many places. But wherever you feel the need to maintain a self-concept as good and right, for me, it's right. I don't really care if people think I'm a bad person, weirdly. I care a lot if people think I'm wrong about something, right? And for my best friend, it's all about good. If somebody thinks she's selfish or inconsiderate or not thoughtful, she literally becomes like this vigilante on a mission to prove that it's not true or whatever. And so that is the hook. That's the hook of the entire allopathic medical system. Because if we don't actually believe that there's something to blame and we take personal responsibility and we employ curiosity to learn what the invitation herein is, we cannot be hooked by a system that actually requires we engage victim consciousness in order to outsource all of that innate power to the, I think, idealized mommy or daddy that's going to save us finally and finally love us and finally protect us and finally give us all the things that we couldn't give ourselves as a child, but we can give ourselves now as adults. So it's like a big trick. It's like a big illusion.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. I love everything that you just said. And I resonate with it so deeply, both for myself and my own personal journey and, the people in our practice and also our listeners. There was a very long period of time where I looked high performance on the outside, but I was absolutely dying on the inside. And I was in a deep, dark night of the soul that just lasted for, as long as I could possibly stretch it. I kept asking this question, well, can I hold to the illusion? Can I still get my belonging and needs met and make everybody happy and be the good girl and do all these things and follow my soul's purpose at the same time? Can I? Please, please? And the answer was, of course, no, because something was so precious and sovereign was coming through and everything had to break down to make room for it. And I see a lot of people in our audience going through something similar right now. And they're either holding on and they think that they're starting to let go, but they don't realize how much is ahead of them, or all the pieces have started to break loose and they're going, oh, what the fuck do I do now? Can you speak to those things?
Oh, yes, I can. Yeah, wow. I'm reeling because I'm just coming out of a very dark moment in my spiral path, I call it. And by moment, I mean like 2 months. And what I have found is that every time I recollect a part of myself, and every time I tap in to more of my power, my capacity for creative expression, for prosperity and abundance, my opportunity to positively impact and influence the world or whatever it might be. Anytime that expansion is available, there was a sacrifice. I actually think that there is so much about what we think is secular in this world. And as a devoted scientism practitioner for many, many years in my conventional medical training and an atheist, it's taken me, many years, like over a decade to even get comfortable with like the word God, right? Let alone divine. And, so much of so-called spirituality, I still have a huge eye roll around, right? And I think that the illusion of, actually, this is some of what people like Steiner call Luciferian consciousness, and Aramaic, the illusion of the secular as separate from the transcendent is a part of how we can get stuck in these patterns of harm. You could even say expressions of evil, if you wanted, where we don't recognize that it's all and everything, right? So that there is not such a thing as the materialist, reductionist, secular worldview of science and objective linear cause and effect. And then there is the transcendent God rays that stream down from on high and never the two shall meet. That of course, those of us who believe that the body is an expression of the soul, that's kind of all you got to get to recognize that the marriage of those two paradigms is real, present, and available at any moment. So I think this idea of sacrifice, while you might think of it as like a religious construct, there are ritualistic aspects to the evolution and development of human consciousness, in not only my opinion. Like I have a program aptly named for your show, Vital Mind Reset, right? The outcomes medically that I have actually published in the medical literature with colleagues and volunteers are history making, literally. Like first, I published, as far as I know, the first case, for example, of Graves' disease, which is, a autoimmune thyroid condition, resolved without medical intervention naturally through lifestyle medicine. I am sure it was not. I know it was not the first case, but in the medical literature, right? What is this program, right? Like, what does it consist of? What is so special about it? Am I like, some kind of evangelistic miracle worker? No, it is a ritual. It is a ritual that has a huge field for reclamation of that innate healing power. And it is a ritual. And I expect the framework that I hold is an expectation for discipline and the power of choice, right? So it's a bit of like go big or go home kind of energy. But so I do think, in answer to your question, that this concept of sacrifice is an essential, I don't want to say like a payment, but it's some sort of an energetic token that is required to pay, in my opinion, in order to access these expanded dimensions of your life experience. So anytime you are courageous enough, because this is the real courage. This to me is the real courage in life. It's not the fireman or the activist or whatever. It is literally the moment where you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I am willing to lose something I think I'm going to die without. A connection, usually, to a group, to your family, to a lover, to a partner, to a friend, to a sibling. I am willing to lose this connection in order to honor and show myself love, respect, and allegiance. And the only time you will even recognize that choice is available is when you know and understand what you need. In the sort of spiritual world of the new age, there's a lot of talk about meeting your own needs and being, safe and content and happy and sourcing from within all of everything.
Being a self-cleaning oven.
Exactly, self-cleaning oven.
Happy, 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 happy.
Yes. And listen, there is a paradox here, right? So of course, if I want to attract a man who is wealthy and passionate about service and he's super fit and hot and whatever, I better get working on being all those things myself. And if I want to attract a partner who is loyal, how am I abandoning myself when I tell my mom, this is fictitious, Mom, if you yell at me on the phone, I am not having this conversation. And then she yells at me on the phone and I stay on the phone for another half an hour. Mm-hmm. That is a simple example of self-betrayal and self-abandonment, right? So how do you get real about offering yourself all the things that you recognize that you need and understand that we are relational beings? And these needs irrepressibly emerge. You cannot unneed what you need. So they irrepressibly emerge in dynamic. And when you recognize buying eggs from the hardware store, that you literally cannot get what you need from a given relationship, or for example, like if I recognize that expecting the allopathic medical system, the conventional medical system to heal me or get me off pharmaceuticals is the same as going to the butcher for a vegan entree, then I can say, you know what? I think I might die actually if I don't go to this doctor or the hospital or whatever it is. That is the literal one. But in other relational examples, it feels the same. You literally can feel like you are going to die. That's courage, right? It's having that fear and moving anyway, because you know that self-allegiance and recognizing that you cannot, like a little kid who wishes and prays and hopes and fantasizes that their mommy and daddy are going to finally one day love them the right way. When we let that fantasy die, we walk into the God creative energy of a consciousness that is free from that disempowered dynamic of our childhood. And we literally start to create the life that we want.
Okay, so for people listening to this and they're going, yep, love it. Yep, read that book, did that workshop, and they have a limited capacity of this. They also have that feeling of, oh shit, there's more work to do, or oh shit, my soul is calling me forward into something more. What would you say to them?
I have a lot to say. I think there is an order of operations. That's just my bias, right? That if you start to take a very deep dive into inner child work and shadow work, when your nervous system, for example, literally doesn't have the capacity to expand into the claim of emotional resonance like harmony and joy, and most importantly, big focus of mine is pleasure, embodied sensual pleasure. And I don't just mean great sex. I mean, literally, like, what does it feel like to like run your nails up your arm? Like, can you take in that much pleasure, not only on your arm, but also in your fingertips? Are these even awake? Do you know that you're also sensing the skin while the skin is sensing your fingers? Like, there's a whole experiential wonderland of literally just being in a human body that becomes available. And it is not available when you're bloated and your hair's falling out and your joints are hurting and you're not sleeping. And you literally are terrified that you're going to like need emergency gut surgery the next time you're doubled over in gasping or whatever. So that's why I'm a big believer in like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I say to everyone, I created a program for it. Doesn't have to be mine. There are others, but do yourself a service by engaging a ritual of simple self-care, but like no bullshit, real choice. Choice is our superpower. Choice is your superpower. It is what will liberate you from victim consciousness in one moment. For example, I have 2 kids, right? I have never taken them to a doctor or an emergency room. I walk this walk, people, okay? Like they are radiant and healthy and all the things, and I never have. That is not scary. I don't think about it. It's just not a thing. I don't like worry about if they get sick. It's not a thing in my field, okay? Then I adopted this cat named Mushu almost 2 years ago. And he was super traumatized in many ways that I'll probably never know about. And he was neutered, which I've actually developed a lot of advocacies against. Like these kinds of interventions in the veterinary world are really wild. Like a lot of us are so concerned about kids and like, wow, what goes on in the veterinary world is just, it's reflexive. So long story short, he's had a lot of issues related to complications related to this neutering, right? He had what's called like a urinary blockade. And in the cat world, they can die within 3 days. Okay, this cat is like a deity in my life. Like he's not the cat. Like he literally has like a seat at the table. Like he's like my son. He's like a kid. I ended up, after all of the things that were available to me in the natural arsenal, in my minimal veterinary arsenal, I ended up bringing him to the cat emergency room, the vet emergency room. And I'm sitting in the parking lot hysterically crying, feeling so powerless and dependent on a system that I fundamentally don't trust. Isn't that the signature of our childhoods, right? I said to myself, Kelly, this was somewhat recently, right? So I've been at this whole like resolving victim consciousness thing for a while. And I said to myself, okay, Kelly, you have a choice here. You could let him pass at home. That is an option. You could invoke other resources. You could make space and room in your consciousness and spirit for a nonlinear outcome, for something to shift, right? Rather than just he's going to get sicker and sicker and die. There are other choices, right? And that's why I'm a huge believer in why I put out all of these case stories and testimonials, because I want everyone to know what is possible when it comes to the resolution of chronic illness. Because if I knew one person who was like, Kelly, don't sweat it. Like my cat had that and he's totally fine. And this is what I did. If I just knew it was possible, I could have reframed my whole energy field and my psychology, more importantly, but I didn't. And so I sat there and I said, I am making a choice to bring him to this emergency room, because the victim consciousness field is to say, I had no choice. I had to go. I had a choice. So when we maintain that, which is activated with the simple lifestyle changes in, a program like mine or others, right? So you're making choices, you're activating that innate power. And then literally your neurobiology will shift out of fight or flight into regeneration. And that's why the outcomes that I have had the privilege of witnessing are not just in my field of expertise in psychiatry, but in irritable bowel and inflammatory bowel disease, in chronic migraines, in acne, and all lupus, like all sorts of things I'm not expert in that came out of this same protocol. Why? Because when the conditions are set for regeneration, that is what unfolds. You don't have to treat a specific illness. You create the conditions for your autonomic nervous system to do what it does best, which is reestablish balance. Then you can start to look at all of those areas of tension and conflict in your life, your relationship, your job, right? The house you're living in, your dynamics with your family of origin. It is so much more available to start to be real with yourself, be honest with yourself, and to start saying, you know what? I need something here that's not available. What am I going to do? Am I going to address that? Are we going to negotiate our needs and how they can be met? Am I going to stand up for my needs and walk out the door? Like, what action makes sense related to your now awareness of that victim dynamic? And it's usually, for most of us listening, it's that rescuer dynamic, right? And what I mean by that is you can recognize it because you feel like if you just show up this way with this voice or this dish, to the dinner, or you just answer the phone at 3 a.m., or you just do this, that, or the other, then maybe you'll be able to control what you get back. That transaction is reliant on the victim triangle, right? You might feel like the savior who's offering her care and attention, sometimes money, and you might feel like, wow, if I don't do it, this person's really in trouble, my mom or my friend or whatever. And you're all in that triangle victims, right? So it's the villain, the victim, and the rescuer. And that rescuer consciousness is usually where our drains are, found. And you should have a net positive energy every day, right? Like you should be growing your energy field with creativity just pouring out of you, right? When that is not happening, you can resolve that. You just find all the leaks, right? You find all those victim stories in your life, and one by one, you courageously turn towards them. However, first you've got to identify them. So, a really simple thing is to just look at your hotspots. What are your points of upset in your life? Like, what are your major complaints? Pick 3 in your life. And underneath those complaints, I really love a woman named Kasia Urbaniak's work. She wrote a tremendous book every woman should read called Unbound. And she talks about underneath these complaints are these desires and the power of desire to shape your life. Desire is not attachment, and it's also not entitlement. So it's not, I deserve this, I'm owed this. It is a longing, and it never ends, right? It's never sated, right? It's this hunger. And I think it's especially for women, the most powerful driving force in our world creating experience. So you can find underneath
our central creating life force.
Yes, it's vital.
And it never stops.
It never stops. It zeros. And, you'll find a desire underneath your complaint. And then you can start to focus on creating. You can start to focus on creating instead of, as my coach, Whitney Lowry says, she's always teaching me about, like, the difference between creating and fixing, right? Where fixing is like, this is wrong with me. Oh boy, I better start doing more shadow work, and I better go to that workshop and read that self-help book. And that is essential. Shadow work you're going to be invited towards it no matter what, because when you have like a feeling of disconnection from your emotions, or you have so much conflict in your life that you can't seem to catch a break, or you just have that nagging sense of like discomfort with your being, the way out is through all those aspects of yourself that you really wish nobody would know about, including yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a simultaneous process of focusing on what it is that you want and how to put your energy towards that, instead of being right about all the ways you've been wronged. That never ends either. So you kind of have a choice which stream to swim in at a certain point.
I think this is really important to just zoom in for a second here, because you talk about identifying hotspots and energy leaks and this victim consciousness. And we are living in a time where we're actually, the dominant narrative is elevating victim consciousness and as something wonderful to play into.
Yes.
And all the virtue signaling and belonging that comes with that. And the reaction against that, if you know in your heart that you are sovereign, there's still a lot of drama about being victimized by not being a part of the victim culture. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yes. So it all makes sense, right? Through this lens. It really does. Because one of the reasons that we're in this massive paradigm shift could be very simply reduced to the transmutation, transformation, evolution, however you want to look at it, from our collective childhood consciousness, that victim consciousness, that disempowerment, which, itself is also an illusion. And it's not like I'm saying kids should have like gotten themselves out of their own, sexual abuse or whatever. However, the meaning that we make, that we are conditioned to make out of our experiences, that is what ultimately is the victim experience, right? Because if you've ever read Viktor Frankl, or, there is such a thing as making empowered meaning out of horrifically and maybe even objectively victimizing circumstances. If you experienced objective abuse, violence, or sexual abuse in your childhood, you made a very special meaning out of that as a kid while it was happening, that you're bad, that you're wrong. And why do we do that, right? If your dad is hitting you, anyone watching would be like, that guy's sick. Right? Something is wrong with that dad. That's not what we do as kids. We say, something's wrong with me. I am bad. I am wrong and dirty and broken and all the things. Why do we do that? I think because we are meant to align with our power, no matter how we can grasp it, right? So if as a little kid I'm being hit and I make my dad wrong, I can't control my dad's wrongness, right? So what I can control is my badness, and I can find ways to hide it. It's like a surrogate empowerment, this whole victim thing. It does feel, have you ever felt when your girlfriend is like commiserating with you about some asshole who like fucked you over or whatever? You feel empowered. It's a hit you get, but it's a surrogate hit. It's like a lick of ice cream when you're thirsty, right? And if that's all you got to go with it. So if you're in the virtue signaling consciousness of shaming others and embodying the aggressor while experiencing yourself as the savior, it's working for you. And you can go ahead and do that. Because the only time it's even relevant to me is if there's fertile soil within me for the accusation that I'm a bad person, for example, for not wearing a mask for grandma. The only reason that would bother me, and I, through one lens, take a lot of heat, in the public sector, whatever you want to say, for, especially my perspectives on the primacy of self-care and self-focus and personal responsibility. And I don't really care that people think I'm an irresponsible and reckless mother, or, I'm endangering people's lives. Like that can't get me because I don't really care. I can self-validate in that place. There are 100 other places in my life that I have a lot of trouble self-validating. And I really have looked to partners, for example, or I don't know, mentors probably. And at some point my parents, for that validation, and not gotten it. And then been invited to, consider, what would a Kelly who can offer herself that validation, or maybe who already has it, like, how would she live her life, right? Like, what would that look like? And that kind of a game I love, because then I can sort of see like, oh, well, there are little ways, like I can start to act as if, or I can start to offer myself that experience. And immediately I'm in that vibration of choice and action and steps that I can take out of this like poor me, no fair energy of susceptibility to invalidation, disapproval, and all of the things that we're all vulnerable to. But no one can hurt, like Byron Katie says, no one can hurt you without your permission, right? So like, let them shame away. And if you feel ashamed that you're not participating in the virtue signaling paradigm of incoherent health experiences or whatever they think they're doing, whatever, if you feel shame, that's your shame.
Yeah, that's someone else's. It's yours.
It's yours. Nobody gave that to you. And thank you very much for showing me that it's there. And so that I can turn towards that shame and approve of how it was protecting me from feeling my badness or wrongness that's just beneath the surface. So like, thank you, because when I would feel that shame, I would immediately feel, in my world, they kind of come together, right? So I would feel finger pointing and blame, and then I would get that surrogate hit of safety and okayness that comes from the victim consciousness. And when you're ready to step out of that, you just do. And when you're not ready, like 1 second before you're ready, you're not ready. And so that's why, for me, it's available. It's not always easy, but it's available to experience compassion for people who are very much still in the fear-based paradigm of relating to the human body, because I was that person 13 or so years ago. I was literally that person. So for me, it's like, not like some people who are kind of born, awake about this. Like I was that person. I thought I was doing good, prescribing my pregnant patients psychotropic medications. And I thought what you do is you take all the precautions necessary, you manage the body into submission, and you treat it like a job. And your doctor will tell you if you're doing your job well. That made sense to me until it didn't. And I was not ready before the moment I was. So you can't coerce that. This is not about information. And that's why, as somebody who's written a couple books with a ton of science in them and hundreds of blogs, the information's out there. If this was about science and information, we'd already be resolved at this point. And I do believe it's about trauma, as I imagine you do too, like, because that cannot be coerced. And when somebody is not willing to look at something, it is because to address the trauma that stands between where they are and their fuller awareness feels like it would kill them. It's not your business to tell them they should do that, right?
Yeah, to me, it's about the false safety and hollow belonging that comes with assuming that something larger than yourself, i.e. a system like the medical care system or the government, is going to protect you and define your life for you, and how wonderful that is, so that you don't have to step into full responsibility for your own life. I know that's what happened to me. I kept up with the comfort of victimhood because as soon as I shed it, I was going to have to be 100% responsible for my own sovereignty and fulfilling my soul's purpose, and that is a big ass responsibility because you're creating and you're adding to your desires your whole life long. And so it's building and getting bigger and more magical. And the longer you hold yourself apart from it, the more uncomfortable it is.
Absolutely. And that's why, I've been accused of victim shaming. And, there's been whole websites devoted to my ableism. I had to look that word up when I first, a friend showed me this website about me. And I thought, you know what? They're right. I am an ableist. And what that implies is, it was actually, I wrote this home birth article that at the time, probably because I was incoherent in many ways, and I'm sure I still am, but I was very then, it garnered death threats and aerial shots of my house and all this stuff. This home birth article from these so-called Jezebel, these so-called feminist outfits that of course are pharma funded and everything else. But anyway, at the time, I recognized, I do believe that anyone can get off of medication. Anyone can heal whatever they intend to. And certainly anyone can have a home birth. Okay. It's not just for the able. And that ableism is something that I will project on every single human that I encounter. And there is this idea of blaming somebody who's struggling and suffering when you say it's their fault or their responsibility. That is not what empowered consciousness is in any way aiming to achieve, is to say oh, wow, you have a necrotic tumor in your breast or whatever. What are you doing wrong in your life?
Right. Or what is the lesson? Get the lesson real quick so you can go back to normal. Something's wrong with you that you haven't gotten the lesson yet. Fucking hate that frame.
Right. And it's when you're struggling and suffering, and all we feel in those moments, 100% of people, I don't care how enlightened you pretend to be, because we are seeing a lot of the so-called spiritual gurus showing us just how unenlightened they actually are about embodiment in this moment, in my opinion. No matter how enlightened you are, when you are afraid, you will go into your victim. I think 100% of the time, forever and ever, all of us. The only difference between somebody who has a modicum of self-ownership and connection to the divine, really, is that they will shortly thereafter create a vessel. That's our inner masculine, right? Create a vessel of containment for that feeling to exist without needing it to be fixed. So that fear that I feel if I touch a lump or whatever is societally conditioned within me. That fear will immediately bring me into betrayal of my body, distrust of my body, separation from my body, right? And a sense of, I can't handle this. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. Please, mommy, daddy, help me. Okay. In some version, that's what's going to happen all in 12 seconds. And if I'm practiced, I will recruit that container and let that fear just run its course, be with it. I will literally say to that feeling, I'm here with you, and not need it to go away in 10 seconds or 8 hours or 6 months. I am here with you. And then that witness, that adult consciousness, is the one that will open up a space for inquiry, for examination, for interrogation of those unseen dimensions that you always kind of know a little bit, right? Where you're supposed to be looking. It's it's like if I ask you, which I won't publicly, but if I ask you, what is it that you know about your life that you really wish you didn't know? That's my favorite question I've ever been asked. And I was asked it by Adyashanti, who's a teacher. I went on a silent retreat with him. And I thought that is the most important question, because it's the way that we can, with one question, bring home the parts that we ourselves have locked into prison. And the experience of scary in this life, right? The experience of fear is totally transformed by that adult watcher, that adult witness, so that we can go on a journey. And the journey is not to get back to how we were before, pre-scary. Yeah. The journey is to move in a direction, just move one step in front of the other. And it's not to undo the tumor, right? Necessarily. I mean, actually, literally, my mentor, Nick Gonzalez, would always tell me, like, when he would have these 34-year stage 4 pancreatic cancer survivors, like that often, what would happen is the tumors, I don't know why I'm going on a biological tangent, but the tumors would encapsulate and they would actually stay for like decades, right? Whereas in the conventional model, like most of those patients would get 6 to 9 months with all the treatments and all the things, right? So anyway, the point is we don't know most of the time how it's supposed to look. You can only know how you want to feel. And if what you want to feel is, I don't know, pleasure, safety, they don't want the same things, right? Then that feeling and beginning to entrain your system around that feeling, which requires, in my opinion, doing all the things first, right? All those lifestyle choices and all those steps and, sort of doing the dirty work in your relationships. It becomes more and more available to you here and now, even before you've achieved the thing that you think can only come through the healed diagnosis, through the partner, through the job, through the money. You start to live, be the change, right? So to speak. And that it's like so lofty, and it's also simultaneously like very accessible, right? So like one thing I've been working on is to imagine what is the validation that I want. I don't really care if somebody tells me I'm smart, honestly, or like pretty or whatever. Like the validation that I have found after 44 years of living that I still long for deeply, and I don't know if I'll ever get over it in this lifetime, is actually for my creativity. It's for my creative expression, right? So whether I wrote a book or whether I made a little 10-second goofy video, I still feel like I want to be appreciated for what I created, right? And I've started taking up things like sewing and whatever recently. I'm not very good at it. And I'll make these like busted ass bags or whatever. And like, I feel literally like I'll come out of the room to my own kids and be like, do you see this? I made this. Do you love it? And if they're like, I get hurt. Right. And my kids know, like, it's important to me that they don't owe me that, but I'm not going to pretend that I don't have that need. Right. So like what validation
so precious.
do you need? Right. Like to really understand that, like, do you want someone to tell you you're beautiful? Do you want someone to hug you and make you feel safe? What would you so long to hear? It's different for each of us, even though those feelings are the same. Like the way that we would get it in relational reality is different.
It can be indirect and weird and constrained and under the surface, or it can be, actually deliberate and whole and intentional and say, hey, this is something that is important to me.
And spoken, and there's desires and then there's kind of like the basic needs, right? Like my friends know that it's a need. I used to be so embarrassed about this. And I'm like, I need to know when a thing is going to end. Right. So we're going to have dinner. I host a lot, right? Like I like to do that. Everyone knows when I say, come on over from 5 to 9, I mean 9. And then it's up to me to actually enforce that, right? Because I actually mean that. I need to know when it's going to end in order for my nervous system to relax. I require time containers, right? Like we agreed how long this discussion was going to be. I would have initiated that if you didn't. I need to know that, right? In order to relax. And I'm not going to push myself, coerce myself, flagellate myself into pretending that I don't need that and then judge myself when I can't relax, when it's an open-ended, ill-formed container. When you know what you need and you ask for it and then you stand by those needs because it is your job to maintain your boundaries. It is no one else's job. That's why, like, I've been also working with this idea that if you trust yourself to stay in allegiance to what you know you need and make the choices accordingly, you don't have to trust anyone else. It doesn't matter whether someone's trustworthy or not, your sibling or your partner, because you trust yourself. And if this ain't working for me, I'm out. That's a phone call or a relationship. And then you build that channel of like very healed connection to your inner child who knows you've got her, right? Nothing to worry about here.
There's so much amazing information to unpack. I hope everybody who's listening to this listens back when they need a shot in the arm, so to speak. Very unfortunate metaphor. Of courage and belonging amongst your tribe of people who are awake and alive and really aware of their own truth or seeking to be all the time. So much good stuff from the granular to the magnificent. What are your final thoughts that you want to share with our audience about standing in their truth and their sovereignty during this time?
Louise Hay talked about this a lot, to just undo so much of the enculturated self-abuse by unconditionally approving of everything that you are. Your virtuous good heart, your manipulative, sneaky, cheating, lying self, your pretend, phony, like, is anyone noticing this isn't really who I am? Persona. All of it, all of it. And when you catch yourself, approve of that too, right? Like in the moment, first offer that. It's okay. It's what I needed to do. And that's why, like I have one daughter who is very, like carries like our whole lineage's worth of shame. Like she's just so prone to feeling it at just all the time. It's like heartbreaking. And I always tell her, if she like does something funky or whatever, I say like, you did it for a good reason. And she's like, no, mama. And I said, people murder for a good reason. People lie for a good reason, for a reason that makes sense to them in the moment. I think that's true all of the time, literally all of the time. And, she has a lot of trouble with it and she's little. So obviously we're going to have trouble with it. If you can have that comportment towards yourself, then you recognize that actually you can just kind of do whatever you want, like actually want, really do what you want. If that means drinking every night, if that means taking psych meds, if that means wearing 8 masks, do what you want. And that restored relationship to yourself, you'll ultimately start to want to do things and you'll stop wanting to do things that are harmful for you. And you'll start to want to do things that are better for you because that self-trust is established through self-approval and a relationship to desire. I mean, not exclusively, but I do think those are very essential tenets to walking your way out of experiences of intense victimization by circumstances that feel beyond your control, that are actually driven by enculturated patterns of self-abuse. And, it's a process. It's like a messy, crazy thing to be a human. And if it doesn't feel that way, I don't know what you're doing, like your whole illusory thing is working for you. Because for the rest of us, it's like, feels like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and it's all worth it. And we know it is, even though I think most of us have wanted to crawl back up into the womb at some point in our process.
Or many times, yeah.
Fall back asleep somehow, pretend we're sleeping. It's worth it because it's literally what we came here for, is that contrast, I think, right? Of the asleepness, of the victimhood into the experience of our divinity, the experience of our God creative power, and the experience of actual love, which I'll speak for myself. I don't know that I've ever felt. I really don't know, but it makes me teary.
And that's all it takes.
Yeah.
This was magnificent, as are you.
Thank
you for coming and for sharing your heart and your brain and your passion with us. And I know that everybody listening is feeling held and seen in a way they may not have in a long time. So let's do this again. We love you, Kelly Brogan.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Go to detoxrejuvenation.com to find the links in the show notes to everything we covered in this episode. Please subscribe, review, and share with other humans who need this precious information. Let's help each other. Until next time, love, Sinclair.